Whipsnade Zoo is huge, with massive 240 hectares. It's one of the largest zoos in Europe, which means there's plenty of space here to provide vast enclosures, even for the biggest animals. And that's exactly why it was founded in 1931 as a sister zoo to London Zoo, because even back in the 1920s, the Zoological Society of London had already realized how limiting the space in the middle of the city was. And since we've already taken a closer look at London Zoo, it only makes sense that we now head out into the countryside to see just how good Whipsnade Zoo really is. After all, as we all know, size isn't everything. But before I share my thoughts with you, let me know in the comments, how do you like Whipsnade Zoo? Do you think it's better than London Zoo? Well, if you want to make that comparison for yourself, you'll find Whipsnade Zoo northwest of London, about a 90-minute drive away, or you can take the bus from Luton. If you arrive by bus just like me, you can actually save 50% on your admission. If you drive though, you don't even have to enter the zoo on foot. It's so vast that they allow you to explore it by car. And for anyone who has trouble walking long distances, that's honestly the only way to manage it. Getting an overview from the map, you can see that the zoo is laid out by continent, with focus on Asia, Africa and Europe, which is where we will start our tour. First up, we get an overview of the lynx enclosure, which is nicely done, but I wouldn't say it blew me away. They could definitely add a few more climbing structures. And as for the wild boars, well, I've seen much larger and more attractive enclosures in many German wildlife parks. The brown bear enclosure, however, is already a showcase example of something you simply couldn't do in a cramped city zoo. There's a small sheltered viewing option where you can see the bears through a glass panel, but the main view is from an elevated path where you get a great overview over this massive enclosure. And even though this is apparently a leftover from the zoo's early days, dating back to the 1930s, even 90 years later, this wooded area still provides an excellent habitat for the bears. So it was a lot of fun watching the 4 resident females, whether they were bathing or digging out a hole in the ground. Also, thanks to the additional fenced-off area, there's really nothing to complain about here. And the wolverine enclosure on the other side of the elevated path is just as impressive. Possibly the largest I've seen for this species, especially since there's a second separable area behind the visible enclosure. And just when I thought, wow, what an enclosure, too bad I probably won't see a wolverine here, I was proven wrong. Not only could I watch one of the animals roaming its territory, but a second wolverine had positioned itself for grooming in the most photogenic way possible. The European section has also large enclosures for European bison and reindeer. Grey wolves used to live here as well, but their old enclosure is now home to African wild dogs. And of course, the red-necked wallabies don't come from Europe either, but they can roam freely across the entire park, just like the maras, which I'd encounter later on. And with that, we are leaving Europe behind, but don't worry, the view here is definitely nicer than post-Brexit. From up here you can gaze far out into the surrounding countryside, and it's such a beautiful view. Against the same stunning backdrop, there's also a walk-through aviary where you can watch penguins. First, the African penguins, which alongside the Humboldt penguins kept in London Zoo, are the most commonly held penguin species in zoos. Northern rockhopper penguins, on the other hand, are a very rare sight in Europe, with only 7 collections across the continent. Just like their South African neighbors, they aren't Antarctic penguins. More than 99% of northern rockhopper penguins breed on Tristan da Cunha, its surrounding islands, and Gulf Islands. These are British overseas territories, so does that technically make them local? In any case, breeding works relatively well, even though after some earlier issues, the zoo decided to hand-rear the newest chick from this year. In terms of space, the two separate penguin enclosures for once can't quite match the amazing Penguin Beach in London, which, to be fair, also houses a much larger colony. You might miss an underwater viewing area as a visitor, but honestly, who really minds when the setting is this unique? Thankfully, the aviary netting is hardly noticeable, and if you're wondering why flightless birds are kept in an aviary at all, aside from protection from foxes, the presence of eider ducks offers another possible explanation. It's just a shame that other species like maybe Inca terns aren't included, because outside of the two penguin enclosures, the aviary does feel a bit unnecessarily large and empty. Well, everything here is on a large scale, and that becomes obvious as soon as we move into the African section, starting with the white rhinos. Their enclosure, which can be divided into two sections, covers 8.5 hectares in total. That alone is larger than some smaller zoos. From raised walkways or an outlook, you can watch the rhinos seemingly without barriers, and it's just wonderful to see them gazing peacefully across such a vast landscape. I was also lucky that day. The youngest rhino and its mother were hanging out relatively close to me. Born in March 2024, little Benya is the latest example that the breeding program, which began here back in 1962 with the goal of establishing a population outside Africa, has been quite successful. The indoor area is also open to visitors and perfectly reflects what Whipsnade is all about. Most facilities aren't exactly modern or flashy, but they are spacious and practical. I really appreciate that the zoo lets visitors take a look behind the scenes, even if these stables weren't built to win any beauty awards. For the most part, Whipsnade doesn't rely on artificial theming, nature itself provides the backdrop. The hoofstock barns you just saw belong to the rhinos' roommates, Blessbox and Gamsbox. Of course, Whipsnade also keeps other African hoofed animals such as zebras, waterbucks and scimitar horned oryxes, all of which live in spacious enclosures. Other mixed species enclosures, for example with ostriches or giraffes, are not used here, probably because most of these enclosures date back to a time when large savanna habitats combining multiple species weren't yet as common as they are today. And while city zoos had to adopt that approach simply because of limited space, well, space never has been an issue here. And as nice and well thought out mixed exhibits generally are, they don't only come with advantages. Ideally, they should be engaging both for visitors and the animals themselves, who can interact with one another. But in a single species enclosure, you can focus entirely on the needs of one particular species, and it can also be beneficial for breeding. There is no clear right or wrong here. As for the giraffes mentioned earlier, these are reticulated giraffes to be exact. You can also see them from an elevated walkway, and even their stable building can be viewed from both through a glass panel on the ground, and from above you get a truly unobstructed look into their small indoor hall. And even in their individual stalls on the right-hand side, you can peek through windows. Since 2022, aardvarks have also been living here at Whipsnade, though unfortunately I didn't get to see them in their spacious enclosure. The meerkats next door, however, more than made up for it. I even got to see some small ones. And I have to say, it's really nice to see that even smaller species are given such large habitats here. This might very well be the biggest meerkat enclosure I have ever seen. Next up are the lions. Their enclosure, Lions of the Serengeti, opened in 2005, and once again it's absolutely massive. I would estimate it's about 6,000 square meters in size. Visitors can enjoy a really lovely glass viewing area that lets you see the animals even better than through the fence. And despite the crowds, I got a great look at the pride devouring their freshly served meal. The only one missing was with the male, Malik, which I know from Zoo Neuwied, the father of the 7 cubs you can currently see here. But this creative sign makes one thing clear: you should always be grateful whenever you get to see lions actually being active. Behind the lion habitat lies Cheetah Rock, the cheetah exhibit, which opened 3 years later at Easter 2008. It's designed with a bit more attention to stylish details than many other parts of the zoo. From African-style huts, visitors can watch the cheetahs through glass panels, but you also get great views through the wire mesh or across a water moat. And once again, the 2 enclosures are impressively spacious. Both must be over 2,000 square meters at least. The 2 hippo enclosures here are also anything but small, but even so, the zoo decided to stop keeping common hippos. In fact, I just missed them as they had moved to Longleat Safari Park only in July of 2025. Inside the house, which from what I could find dates back to 1996, I did however get to see Tapoon, the pygmy hippo. And thanks to a helpful keeper's tip, I also managed to spot Anna, the zoo's new Brazilian tapir, or at least her rear end. The decision to give up the common hippos was officially explained as being part of the breeding program, but I wouldn't be surprised if the indoor holding conditions also played a role. While the facilities still seem fine to smaller heavyweights, they must have been pretty cramped for full-sized hippos. Behind the cheetahs, the path takes you past another large hoofstock paddock and finally to a flamingo pond, which makes for a lovely conclusion to the African section, at least if you ignore the fact that these are Caribbean flamingos, which, just like Anna, don't really belong to Africa. But oh my. Before we head over to Asia, probably the largest section of the zoo, let's first stop at the base camp. Here you'll find not just a restaurant and a large playground, which has basically everything a kid could dream of. No, there is also the Birds of the World arena, where, as the name suggests, you can watch a bird show. Unfortunately for me, it was only a brief pleasure since I had to leave early to catch my bus. In the past, there was even a dolphinarium here, which was later used for a seal show. Sea lions were kept here up until 2021, when they moved to Yorkshire Wildlife Park into a fantastic enclosure, but we will cover that in the upcoming video, so don't forget to subscribe. Do it now. This is an order. Does it help when I do a German accent on purpose? Sorry, time to calm down, and we can do that really well in the farm area, which I overall quite enjoyed. Okay, the design was maybe a touch too colorful and kitschy for my taste, but I get that it's primarily aimed at kids. What I really didn't understand though was why some of the animals had to stay in tiny fenced-off sections. Why not let them all roam this big enclosure together? Maybe it was just a temporary solution, I don't know. The base camp also has a little train station from which you can take a ride on a historic narrow gauge railway that loops through the Asian section. But we explore the area on foot as well. Starting with the enclosures for red pandas and small-clawed otters, which are right next to the base camp. While I was at least able to spot a red panda up in a tree, the otters didn't show themselves at all. And with the Siberian tiger, I also only got this one view. Really a shame, especially because their enclosure is amazing. It's not only spacious, but also has a large pool and the most impressive climbing structures I have ever seen in a tiger enclosure. It must be absolutely incredible if you actually get to see a tiger up there in the air. Of course, the Asian section also has huge enclosures for hoofed animals, as you can see here, for example, with the yaks. Here you will also find the only real safari-style enclosure where you can drive with your car along the passage through Asia, past deer, bantangs and Bactrian camels. But don't worry, if you explore on foot, you're not missing much. Some animals might only be visible from a distance, but that's true for pretty much every enclosure anyway, including nilgai. Still relatively new is the monkey forest, which opened in March 2024. In the first of the two massive enclosures live Tonkin langurs, which remain quite rare in Europe, with currently only 10 zoos that have them. They share their enclosure, which can be viewed through glass panels, with Barbarossas, which I unfortunately didn't get to see. The second enclosure is home to Celebes crested macaques, which have a fantastic 11,500 square meter habitat here, including a forested area with over 100 trees. At the end of the path, visitors can also view the indoor enclosures. Here I was able to get a closer look at an anoa. This small species of wild cattle lives together with the macaques. The monkeys' indoor areas are also very well furnished, but just like with the older buildings, everything here is more practical than spectacular. This also applies to the Indian rhino house, which opened in 2008. But here I also have to criticize the amount of indoor space. Just like white rhinos, Indian rhinos are more cold resistant than you might think, but during the winter they probably still have to stay inside quite often, and the indoor space on its own seems rather tight. No matter how large the outdoor paddocks are, that's just not an ideal setup. By the way, next door are the Visayan warty pigs, a species that's often kept together with Indian rhinos elsewhere, but here of course they are housed on their own again. And now we have reached the Asian elephants, which unsurprisingly also have a truly vast area to roam. The zoo itself claims the habitat covers 30 acres, about 12 hectares, though that figure would probably only be accurate if the elephants also had access to the fields behind. Either way, the breeding herd has plenty of room, and it's a real joy to watch them here. The bull, however, wasn't particularly photogenic that day. Just like in the wild, he lives alone outside of the breeding season, and as so often, it's a bit disappointing to see how much smaller his area is compared to the herds. The elephant facilities were last updated in 2017, when the zoo opened the Centre of Elephant Care at a cost of £2 million, and yes, even the Queen was here for that. The project added around 700 square meters of new indoor space, split into two, so unlike the rhinos, the elephants can roam inside as well. But on the left, behind the scenes, are of course also elephant boxes. So all in all, it's a really well-designed elephant facility, not only thanks to its sheer size, but also due to clever features like timed feeding pots that keep the herd active. However, the pool for the herd is quite small, and indoors there doesn't seem to be one at all, so there's definitely also still room for improvement here. And that brings us to the end of the Asian section and slowly towards the end of our tour. But there are still a few highlights waiting for us, like the aquarium, which opened in 2016. According to the zoo guide, it's supposedly Europe's first aquarium dedicated to freshwater species. Sounds groundbreaking, but that's just nonsense. I honestly have no idea where that claim comes from. Anyway, even though there are also some reptiles on display here, the aquarium didn't really leave much of a lasting impression on me. But reptile fans will probably still at least enjoy seeing the West African dwarf crocodiles. What I liked a lot more was the attached butterfly house, even if, of course, the concept itself isn't exactly new. A tropical hall full of butterflies flying freely around you just always works, at least for me. And the same goes for walk-through lemur enclosures. The one here opened in 2007 and is located right across from the entrance on what used to be the elephant's old paddock. While roughly 2,000 square meters weren't exactly spacious for elephants, it's actually a fantastic home for ring-tailed lemurs and black lemurs. Thanks to the dense planting, it's also one of the most beautiful enclosures in the whole zoo, especially since, as we've seen, theming isn't exactly Whipsnade's main focus. The chimpanzee enclosure, on the other hand, is honestly quite an eyesore. The indoor areas look dated and completely cluttered, and outside that impression only continues. Sure, it's nice that they've made the most out of the available space with all that enrichment, but this is definitely not what what a modern chimpanzee enclosure should look like. And if you're thinking, wow, this looks terrible, then I've shown you how easy it is to create a manipulative impression of a zoo. Because this is the actual main outdoor enclosure for the chimps, which I just didn't show you, and it looks much better, doesn't it? More natural, and it's clearly much more spacious. It also features a large climbing frame that also gives the animals a great view over their surroundings. Still, it's not exactly an outstanding exhibit, not in terms of design and not in terms of size either. And as you might know already, I'm not a big fan of water modes for chimps, since they've sadly become death traps for them in several zoos before. So even though it's not nearly as bad as I first made it seem, this would still be the first enclosure here I'd love to see modernized. And with that, we are almost done. There's just one more area near the entrance, the woodland walk. It takes you on a short loop through a lovely patch of forest with a few aviaries at the end. On the map it just says owls, and there are indeed great grey owls here, but also red-crested turacos and spotted laughing thrushes, which I really didn't expect to find here. I might have neglected the birds in this video a bit, to be fair, aside from a few cranes, rheas, and a marabou aviary, there's really not that much to see on display. Behind the scenes though, Whipsnade actually has a bird breeding center, which you can apparently visit as part of a special tour. And with that, let's end our tour of Whipsnade with a short and sweet conclusion. Because for the most part, Whipsnade Zoo makes it easy for me. The animal collection here isn't exactly anything crazy, but still offers a solid variety. Mainly, of course, large animals that just perfectly fit this place, because everything here is big, spacious, and that's one of the reasons why the animal husbandry here is on a relatively high level. And the vastness of the whole parkway also makes for a very different visitor experience, especially compared to London Zoo. But overall, not many zoos that are not safari parks let you drive around in your car. And yes, the fact that there are cars driving around can be a bit irritating at first, but after a while I didn't really mind. Mostly you just see them parked somewhere and you are only allowed to drive very slow. It doesn't take too much away from the overall countryside feeling that is really lovely. Or better yet, it is what makes Whipsnade Zoo work, because without it, the fact that there isn't much theming going on and everything is designed relatively practical, not really for the eye, would result in a relatively ugly zoo, but the natural backdrop saves it. And that's why, in the end, I think I actually liked Whipsnade Zoo a bit more than its sister zoo in London, which, in my opinion, is currently facing a few more serious challenges. Although, during my UK trip I also visited another zoo that's quite similar to Whipsnade, and I have to admit I did like that one even more. Can you guess which zoo I'm talking about? Leave a comment down below, tell me what you think of Whipsnade Zoo, give the video a thumbs up. I think there's also this new hype feature, do that as well, I guess. And if you don't want to miss the other 8 UK zoos and many more from all across of Europe and maybe even the world, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. Better do it quickly or I'll have to start exaggerating my German accent again. And with that, take care, see you soon, yours truly, Martin. Or as we say in Germany, auf Wiedersehen, bis bald, macht's gut und oh mein Gott, ein Termin im Bürgerbüro ist frei. Oh, scheiße, ups, hat das jemand gesehen? Nein, das hat niemand gesehen, ne? Alles ist cool, nichts zu sehen hier. Und jetzt sind die Termine natürlich schon wieder alle weg.